I stood in that glittering ballroom, diamonds dripping from every woman except me, watching my husband's mother whisper poison about the help who somehow ended up at their table. She didn't know I was listening. She didn't know I was about to change everything. My name is Maya, and this is the story of how I went from being the invisible woman in a room full of crystal chandeliers to becoming someone they could never ignore again. But let me take you back to that night, the night that changed my entire life. The Carter family charity gala was everything you'd expect from old money. Towering ice sculptures, waiters in white gloves, and enough diamonds to blind someone. I felt like I was walking through a museum where I didn't belong, where every step I took echoed too loudly on the marble floor. The air itself felt heavy with judgment, thick with the kind of perfume that costs more than most people's rent. I smoothed down my black dress, the one I'd saved for months to buy, the one that felt so perfect in my bedroom mirror, but now seemed cheap under these lights. Around me, women glided in gowns that probably cost more than my car, their laughter delicate and practiced, like wind chimes. I caught fragments of conversations about summer homes in the Hamptons, art auctions in Paris, and charity boards they served on for social status rather than the cause. That's when I heard her, my mother-in-law, Evelyn Carter. Her voice carried just enough for her circle to hear. "I simply don't understand what Liam was thinking," she said, her tone dripping with the kind of disgust reserved for spoiled milk. Well, you know, appropriate company is so important at these events. Image is everything after all. The women around her nodded like synchronized swimmers, their eyes finding me across the room. I felt my cheeks burn and my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I gripped my clutch tighter, my knuckles probably white under my brown skin that suddenly felt like a spotlight was shining on it. But you know what? Let me tell you how I got here, because this story isn't just about that night. It's about love, real love, and how it can make you brave enough to fight for yourself. I met Liam 18 months earlier at the most unlikely place, a tiny coffee shop in Brooklyn where I was working my second job. I was exhausted, pulling double shifts to help pay for my mother's medical bills when this man in an expensive suit walked in, looking completely lost. He ordered a simple black coffee and left a $20 tip for a $3 drink. "You don't have to do that," I told him, but he just smiled and said, "Good service deserves recognition." He came back the next day and the next, and on the fourth day, he asked me out. Our first date wasn't at some fancy restaurant. Liam took me to this little Italian place where the owner's grandmother still made the pasta by hand. We talked for hours about everything. My dreams of starting my own business, his frustration with his family's expectations, how we both felt like we were living lives that didn't quite fit us. On our third date, he showed up at my apartment with sunflowers, a whole armful of them. "How did you know these were my favorite?" I asked, and he grinned. "You mentioned once that they always face the sun no matter what. They reminded you to stay positive." That's when I knew I was falling for him. Not because of his money, not because of his family name, but because he listened, really listened. Our first kiss happened in the rain outside my building after we got caught in a sudden downpour after dinner. Instead of running for cover, we just stood there laughing, completely soaked. He brushed a wet curl from my face and kissed me so gently like I was something precious. The rain felt like magic that night. The next few months felt like living in a romantic movie. Weekend trips to his beach house, where we walked along the shore holding hands. Cozy dinners where he cooked for me. Turns out billionaires can make a mean scrambled egg. And quiet evenings where we talked about our future. He made me feel like I was enough, like I was everything. Then I met his family. The first dinner at the Carter estate was like walking into a courtroom where I was already guilty. His father barely acknowledged me. His mother smiled with her mouth but not her eyes, and his sister looked at me like I was an interesting specimen in a jar. "So Maya," Evelyn said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Liam tells us you work in service." The way she said service made it sound dirty. I explained about the coffee shop, about working my way through business school, about my dreams. But I could see it didn't matter in their eyes. I would always be the girl who served coffee, never the woman who deserved their son. Liam sat there uncomfortable but silent. He squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't speak up, didn't defend me, didn't tell his mother that my worth wasn't measured by my bank account or my pedigree. That night, driving home, I felt smaller than I had in years. "They just need time to get to know you," Liam said, but we both knew that wasn't true. Time wouldn't change the color of my skin or erase my working-class background. Over the months that followed, family dinners became exercises in endurance. I'd smile through their subtle digs about my clothes, my accent, my family. Liam would hold my hand and promise things would get better, but they never did. I started to feel invisible in my own marriage, like I was disappearing piece by piece every time I walked into that house. And now, standing in this ballroom, listening to my mother-in-law talk about me like I wasn't even human, I realized something had to change because I wasn't going to disappear, not anymore. 3 days after the gala, everything changed. I was at Liam's penthouse, waiting for him to come home from work when I heard Evelyn's voice drifting from his home office. She was on the phone, and what I heard made my blood run cold. The investigator found exactly what we expected, she was saying, her voice sharp with satisfaction. Working-class background, single mother, father absent, multiple jobs to support her sick mother. Very touching, really. But here's the interesting part. She has student loans, credit card debt. She's clearly after the money. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding so loud I was afraid she'd hear it. "We need to expose this before she gets her claws in deeper," Evelyn continued. "I'm thinking the hospital fundraiser next month. Very public, very embarrassing. Liam will finally see what she really is." My hands were shaking as I backed away from the door. They were planning to destroy me publicly, to humiliate me in front of hundreds of people, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. They wanted to tear it down just to prove their point. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Liam, watching him breathe peacefully while my mind raced. He had no idea what his family was planning. Part of me wanted to wake him up to tell him everything, to beg him to choose me over them, but I knew that wasn't fair. He shouldn't have to choose. He should want to defend me on his own. So, I made a different choice. I decided to fight back. The next morning, after Liam left for work, I started digging. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them what dirty really looked like. I spent hours online researching the Carter family history, their business dealings, their charitable contributions. What I found made me sick to my stomach. The Carter fortune wasn't built on innovation or hard work as they claimed. It came from exploiting immigrant workers in their factories, from environmental violations they'd covered up for decades, from tax shelters that would make a mobster blush. Their charity work was nothing more than money laundering disguised as philanthropy. I had them. I had everything I needed to destroy their perfect reputation. But as I sat there with printed documents spread across my kitchen table, I realized something important. I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to win by destroying others. Instead, I wanted to win by being better than them. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I researched every board member who would be at the hospital fundraiser, learned about their genuine charitable work, their real contributions to society. I practiced my speech in the mirror until I could deliver it without my voice shaking. I bought a dress, not the most expensive one I could find, but one that made me feel confident and beautiful. The night before the fundraiser, Liam came home with flowers, not sunflowers this time, but red roses. Expensive, perfect, lifeless. "For tomorrow night," he said, kissing my cheek. "I want you to look perfect. Perfect, not happy, not confident, not proud, perfect, like a trophy he could display." "Liam," I said carefully, "what if your family tries to embarrass me tomorrow?" He laughed, actually laughed. "They wouldn't do that, sweetheart. They're difficult, but they're not cruel." That's when I knew he really had no idea who his family was. He'd been living in a bubble his whole life, protected from their worst impulses, blind to their cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was still hope for us. The hospital fundraiser started exactly like I expected. Evelyn introduced me to people as Liam's friend, with just enough pause to make it insulting. His father ignored me completely, talking around me like I was invisible. His sister made pointed comments about the diversity of guests this year, but I was ready for them. When Evelyn stood up to give her speech about the importance of family values and supporting those less fortunate, I felt my moment coming. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, standing up smoothly. "I'd like to add a few words if I may." The room fell silent. Evelyn's face went white then red. But before she could object, I was already speaking. "My name is Maya Ellis," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Some of you know me as Liam's wife. Others might know me as the girl who used to serve coffee in Brooklyn. But tonight, I want you to know me as someone who understands what real charity looks like." I talked about my mother, who cleaned office buildings at night, so she could volunteer at the free clinic during the day. I talked about my neighbors who shared their last dollar with families who had even less. I talked about dignity, about respect, about what it really means to lift others up instead of pushing them down. True generosity, I said, looking directly at Evelyn, isn't about tax deductions or social status. It's about seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. The room erupted in applause, real applause, not the polite clapping you hear at these events. People were standing, nodding, some wiping their eyes. But the best part was watching Liam's face. He was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as his wife, not as his family's problem, but as the woman he fell in love with. The woman who was brave enough to stand up for herself when he couldn't find the courage to stand up for her. After the dinner, he pulled me aside, his eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, pulling me into his arms. "I've been such a coward. I've let them treat you like you don't matter, and you matter more than anything in this world to me." He kissed me then, right there in front of everyone, with a kind of passion that reminded me why I fell in love with him. It was our first real kiss in months, not a peck on the cheek, not a distracted goodbye, but a kiss that said everything words couldn't. That night we went home and talked until sunrise, really talked, like we used to in those early days when we discovered we were perfect for each other. He told me he'd been so afraid of losing his family that he'd almost lost me instead. I told him about the investigation, about Evelyn's plan, about everything. "We're going to do this together from now on," he promised, holding me close as the sun came up over the city. "No more choosing sides. It's us against the world." For the first time in months, I believed him. For the first time in months, I felt like we were really married again. 2 weeks later, Evelyn called a family meeting. She wanted to discuss my inappropriate behavior at the fundraiser and how it reflected poorly on the family name. Liam warned me she was planning something big, something designed to force him to choose between me and them once and for all. "Let her try," I told him. "I'm not the same woman who stood quietly in that ballroom anymore." The meeting was held at the family estate in the same dining room where I'd first been made to feel small. This time, though, I walked in with my head high, my hand firmly in Liam's, ready for whatever they threw at me. "Maya," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with false concern, "we need to discuss your future with this family. Your little speech the other night was enlightening. It made us realize just how different our values really are." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of me working at the coffee shop, me visiting my mother at the clinic, me at the grocery store using coupons. They'd been following me, documenting my life like I was some kind of criminal. "We're prepared to offer you a generous settlement," she continued smoothly, "enough to pay off your debts, take care of your mother, start fresh somewhere new. All you have to do is walk away from Liam quietly. No drama, no scandal." The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock. Liam's father leaned back in his chair, confident they'd won. His sister smirked like she was watching a particularly entertaining show. I looked at the photos again, evidence of the life I'd built with my own hands, the family I'd supported with my own strength. Then I looked at Liam, who was staring at his family like he'd never seen them before. "You know what?" I said, standing up slowly. "You're absolutely right. Our values are completely different." I picked up the photos and held them up one by one. This is me working 3 jobs to put myself through school. This is me taking care of my mother when she was sick. This is me using coupons because I believe in being responsible with money. And you think these things make me unworthy of your son? Evelyn's confident smile faltered. But here's what you don't understand, I continued, my voice growing stronger. These photos don't embarrass me. They make me proud. They show a woman who works for what she wants, who takes care of the people she loves, who doesn't need anyone else's money to define her worth. I turned to Liam's father. You want to know about values? I have copies of your company's environmental violations, your labor disputes, your tax avoidance schemes. Should we talk about whose values are really questionable here? The color drained from his face. But I'm not going to destroy your family the way you tried to destroy me, I said, my voice calm now, because unlike you, I actually have values. What happened next changed everything. Liam stood up beside me, his face hard with an anger I'd never seen before. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. I've listened to this poison for too long. Maya is my wife, and she's worth 10 of any of you. He turned to his mother, and for the first time in his life, he looked at her without love, without the desperate need for her approval. You hired investigators to follow my wife. You tried to bribe her to leave me. What kind of people are you? Evelyn tried to speak, but Liam held up his hand. I'm done, he said simply. I'm done pretending you're good people just because you're my family. I'm done making excuses for your cruelty, and I'm done choosing anyone over the woman I love. He took my hand and pulled me toward the door. If you can't respect my wife, then you can't have me in your life. We walked out of that house together, and I felt lighter than I had in months. In the car, Liam was quiet for a long time, processing the fact that he'd just cut ties with his family. Are you okay? I asked him. He looked at me with those beautiful eyes that had first captured my heart in that Brooklyn coffee shop. I'm better than okay, he said. I'm free. The next few weeks were like falling in love all over again. Without his family's constant criticism and manipulation, Liam became the man I'd first met. Funny, thoughtful, passionate about life. We planned a second honeymoon to Paris, just the two of us, to celebrate our new beginning. In Paris, we renewed our vows in a tiny chapel with just the priest and a local couple as witnesses. Liam had written new vows, and when he read them, both of us were crying. I promise to choose you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Every day, in every situation. I promise to choose you. I promise to see you the way you deserve to be seen, as the strongest, most beautiful, most amazing woman I've ever known. We spent 2 weeks in Paris, walking along the Seine, eating croissants in bed, making love like teenagers. It was everything our original honeymoon should have been, but wasn't because back then, I'd been too worried about fitting into his world to just enjoy being with him. When we returned home, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to use the settlement money. Yes, they'd actually left it on the table when we walked out, to start my own business. I opened a consulting firm for small businesses, helping entrepreneurs who looked like me navigate the same challenges I'd faced. Within 6 months, I had more clients than I could handle. Within a year, I was featured on the cover of Business Weekly as one of the city's most promising young entrepreneurs. Liam was incredibly proud, but more than that, he was supportive in ways his family never would have been. He helped me network, introduced me to potential clients, celebrated every victory like it was his own. The best part was watching his family's reaction to my success. Evelyn had to watch me on the morning news talking about empowering women in business. His father had to read about my company's community partnerships in the financial section. His sister had to see me at charity events, not as the woman trying to fit in, but as the woman everyone wanted to meet. But the real victory wasn't their discomfort. It was the young women who started reaching out to me, telling me my story had inspired them to believe in themselves. It was the couples who wrote to say I'd shown them what real partnership looked like. It was the mothers who thanked me for proving that love could conquer prejudice. A year after that terrible family meeting, Liam and I were stronger than ever. We'd bought our own house, started our own traditions, and built our own version of family with friends who loved us both exactly as we were. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Liam pulled out a small box. "We never really got engaged properly," he said, grinning. "I mean, the first time I was so nervous about my family's reaction that I forgot to make it about us." Inside the box was a simple, beautiful ring, not the enormous diamond his mother would have chosen, but a vintage piece with sunflowers engraved around the band. "Will you marry me again?" he asked. Not Liam Carter's wife, not the woman trying to fit into my world, but Maya, the woman who changed my world. Of course, I said yes. 2 years later, I was back in a ballroom, but this time I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was the guest of honor at the Women in Business Gala, receiving an award for Entrepreneur of the Year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Some of the same people who'd whispered about me at the Carter Charity Gala were now applauding as I walked to the podium. Evelyn herself was in the audience, her face carefully neutral as she watched the woman she'd tried to destroy accept recognition for everything she'd built on her own. My speech that night was different from the one I'd given at the hospital fundraiser. This time, I wasn't defending myself. I was celebrating how far I'd come. 3 years ago, I told the crowd, I stood in a room very much like this one, feeling like I didn't belong. Tonight, I stand here knowing that belonging isn't about where you come from or who accepts you. It's about accepting yourself. I looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, all of them looking at me with respect I'd earned through my own work. To the young women in the audience tonight, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. It's determined by how you choose to rise above them. After the ceremony, Liam and I danced to the same song that had played at our wedding, but everything was different now. I wasn't the nervous bride trying to please his family. He wasn't the conflicted son torn between loyalty and love. We were just two people who'd fought for each other and won. "I'm proud of you," he whispered as we swayed together. "I'm proud of us," I whispered back. As the evening wound down, I caught sight of Evelyn leaving early, her head held high, but her shoulders slightly slumped. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd lost her son's respect and gained nothing in return except the knowledge that the woman she'd tried to destroy had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that her cruelty had forced me to find my own strength. Grateful that her rejection had pushed me to build something entirely my own. Grateful that her attempts to tear me down had only made me rise higher. Liam and I left the gala hand in hand, just like we had that night at his family's estate. But this time, we weren't running away from anything. We were walking toward our future, a future we'd built together, brick by brick, choice by choice, kiss by kiss. The last thing I remember from that perfect night was Liam stopping on the sidewalk outside the hotel, pulling me close, and kissing me under the streetlights while New York City sparkled around us. "Thank you," he said against my lips. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For showing me what real love looks like. For being brave enough to fight for yourself when I was too scared to fight for you." I smiled, thinking about that terrified woman who'd stood in a ballroom 3 years ago, listening to her mother-in-law's poison and feeling like she was disappearing. I didn't fight for myself, I told him. I fought for us. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat because that's what love really is. Not just the romance, not just the flowers and kisses and romantic vacations. It's choosing each other every single day, even when the world tries to tell you that you don't belong together, especially then. And we've been choosing each other ever since.